I never thought my son's voice could sound so unfamiliar to me. It was sharp that evening, cold like the Atlantic wind that used to whistle through the windows of our beach house. He stood in the kitchen, hands in his pockets, looking everywhere except at me. The same kitchen where I once taught him to make grilled cheese sandwiches and bandaged his scraped knees. "We're going tomorrow, Mom," he said. "I've sold your beach house." For a few seconds, I thought I'd misheard him. Maybe I was tired. Maybe he was joking. But his tone, it wasn't a joke. It was businesslike, detached, like he was talking to some old woman from a real estate office. "You did what?" I asked quietly, clutching the counter for balance. "Sold it," he repeated with a sigh, as if explaining something simple to a child. "It was just sitting there, Mom, empty most of the time, and you barely go anymore." I blinked. The house he was talking about wasn't just a property. It was our home, the one my late husband, David, had built plank by plank when we were newly married. It held every laugh, every summer memory, every ghost of our past. "You sold my home," I whispered. "Technically," he said, adjusting his watch, "it was in my name since you transferred it years ago for tax purposes. Remember?" Oh, I remembered. I remembered every naive, trusting decision I made after David died, when I was drowning in grief and lawyers' words. My son, Ethan, had been the one I leaned on. He told me it was just a paper thing, that it was still mine, just legally under his name for simplicity. Now, I was staring at the price of that simplicity. "But Ethan," I said softly, "your father built that house. You spent every summer there until you were 15. It's part of us." His eyes flickered. "Guilt?" Maybe for a second. Then he exhaled. "Look, Mom, things change. Claire and I need the money for the new house. It's a smart investment move." Claire, his wife of 2 years, the woman who called me Mrs. Bennett for the first 6 months of their marriage, as if I were a stranger. The woman who'd never liked the beach house because, in her words, it smells like the past. I felt something break inside me. But I didn't cry. Not yet. "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning. The buyers are taking possession at 10. Claire's already packing up your stuff." "My stuff, not our stuff." That was when I finally saw the faint outline of her behind him, in the doorway. Perfect blonde curls, a satisfied smirk she tried to hide. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I turned away from both of them, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window, staring out into the dark street. My mind was a storm, flashes of memory, betrayal, disbelief. Every part of me screamed to yell, to fight, to remind him who raised him. But instead, I went still. I'd learned something over the years. Grief teaches patience, and patience gives birth to quiet power. By sunrise, I had made coffee and sat with my old photo album, flipping through pictures of Ethan as a boy, covered in sand, chasing seagulls, laughing with David. Every page felt like a stab wound, but beneath the pain, something colder started forming. A plan. The beach house was in Cape May, New Jersey, a modest, 2-story house painted pale blue with white shutters. David had built it the summer Ethan turned 4. He'd said, "When I'm gone, this house will still hold us together." He wasn't wrong. It had, until now. We arrived that morning. Claire was already giving orders to the movers, her manicured hands pointing at boxes labeled donation and trash. I didn't dare look inside. "Mom, please," Ethan said as I paused by the front porch. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at him, the son I once thought would never hurt me. "You already made it harder than it ever had to be, Ethan." He didn't reply. When the real estate agent arrived, all smiles and paperwork, I stepped back and let them talk. I noticed the buyers, a young couple, maybe in their late 20s. They looked thrilled, starry-eyed, holding hands. I didn't hate them. They didn't know. As they signed, I quietly excused myself and went upstairs. The house was almost empty, except for one thing, the old chest in my bedroom closet. David's chest, the one Ethan had never cared to open. Inside were documents, photos, and more importantly, the original property transfer deed David had left in both our names before he died. When the lawyer had redrafted it after David's passing, I was in shock. I didn't notice that Ethan's name had replaced mine entirely, but David's original will, the notarized copy still sealed in that chest, clearly stated that the property would revert to me unless I chose to gift it. I smiled then, a slow, dangerous smile, because I had never legally gifted it, and Claire had no idea. I took photos of the document, sent them to my old attorney, and told him everything. He was furious on my behalf, and more importantly,
like, subscribe, and comment below this video for the next story.
Interested. Technically, he said, if the transfer was made while you were under emotional distress and the will explicitly stated reversion, you could challenge the sale, especially if there's proof your son acted without full consent. Can we stop the sale? I asked. He paused. Maybe not the sale, but we can freeze the funds once they hit his account and reclaim ownership through a civil suit. You could even make a case for fraud. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I didn't want the money. I wanted justice. By afternoon, the sale was done. The papers signed. Ethan and Claire left in their shiny new Tesla, probably thinking they'd pulled off something clever. I stayed one more night in that house, using the spare keys they forgot to take back. The ocean was calm, silver under the moonlight. I walked down to the shore barefoot, feeling the sand sink beneath me. David, I whispered into the waves, they sold your dream. But I'll get it back. You'll see. The wind carried my promise out to sea. 2 weeks later, I got the call. My attorney had filed the motion. The funds from the sale, over $740,000, were frozen pending investigation. And the buyers? Their purchase had been placed on legal hold. Ethan called me that night, panicked. Mom, what the hell did you do? The money's frozen. The buyers are threatening to sue. I sipped my tea calmly. Oh, Ethan, I'm just making sure everything was done properly. You know me, I like things done right. Mom, please don't do this. Claire and you, I interrupted. You sold something that wasn't yours to sell. Legally, oh, legally? I said sharply. Then you won't mind if the courts look into it, will you? There was silence. Then a soft, disbelieving laugh. You're really doing this? To your own son? Yes, I said. To the man who stopped being my son the moment he treated me like an inconvenience. He hung up. That night, I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. For the first time in years, I was no longer the helpless widow. I was me again, the woman David had fallen in love with. Strong, clever, patient. I started digging deeper. Every document, every transaction Ethan had made recently, I found them all. And what I found broke my heart and hardened it further. He and Claire weren't in financial trouble. They weren't buying a house. They were planning to start a boutique investment firm using my property's money. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had planned it. That was the night I decided this wouldn't just be a legal victory. It would be personal. I reached out to the young couple who'd bought the house. I explained everything, the will, the fraud, the case. They were furious but understanding. When I promised them priority once the case settled, they agreed to testify that Ethan never disclosed ownership uncertainty. Meanwhile, I quietly contacted a local journalist who ran a column on family fraud and elder exploitation. She loved the story, a mother fighting back after her son sold her house without consent. We agreed on anonymity at first, but later I'd let the truth out fully. When Claire called me next, her voice trembling, I knew the pressure was mounting. Mrs. Bennett, she said, forcing politeness. Please, you don't understand. Ethan was just trying to help. We needed. Don't lie to me, Claire, I said evenly. You didn't need help. You wanted control. But you made one mistake. What mistake? She snapped. You underestimated how much I remember. That night, as I sat at my desk printing legal papers, the irony made me smile. For years, they had thought I was weak, too sentimental, too slow, too forgiving. But I had learned that revenge, when done right, doesn't come from anger. It comes from patience and timing. And my timing was perfect, because what they didn't know was I still owned something they couldn't touch. Something that would destroy their shiny little empire before it even began. For the next few days, I became someone new. Someone quiet but deliberate. I wasn't the grieving widow anymore. I was a strategist, one with a lifetime of love turned into focus. My attorney, Mr. Lowe, was tireless. Margaret, he told me, you have every legal ground to reclaim ownership. The will, the misrepresentation, your son's intent, it's all enough. But are you ready for what that means? It will get public. I didn't flinch. Let it. If my son wanted privacy, he shouldn't have betrayed me. Still, I knew the storm ahead would test every bit of my resolve. Ethan wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man who'd learned how to manipulate feelings to get what he wanted. But he hadn't learned that some hearts don't just break, they sharpen. A week later, Ethan showed up at my door. He didn't look like the boy I remembered, the one who used to knock softly before coming in. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting with irritation. Behind him, Claire hovered like a vulture in designer heels. "Mom," he started, "can we talk?" I gestured toward the living room, though I already knew what this was. I could see the panic behind his calm exterior. Frozen money tends to rattle the greedy. He sat down, running his hands through his hair. I spoke to the lawyer. He said you filed for fraud. Mom, do you know how serious that is? I stayed silent, letting him talk. Look, you're upset, I get that. Maybe I should have told you before selling. But this is getting out of hand. The buyers are threatening legal action. Claire's parents are furious. You're ruining our lives over a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I said quietly, you sold your dead father's house without asking me. You took the only thing I had left of him. His voice rose. You put it in my name. I met his gaze, steady and cold, because I trusted you. That's the part you can't buy back. Claire spoke up, finally. Mrs. Bennett, please. We didn't mean for it to be like this. We thought, don't. I interrupted, my tone sharp enough to make her stop mid-sentence. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I'd be too old, too sentimental, too quiet to fight back. She looked at Ethan, clearly caught off guard by my calm. She's bluffing, she whispered. Am I? I said, leaning forward. Because as of this morning, the state court has frozen not just the funds from the sale, but also your joint investment account. Claire's face turned pale. What? Turns out, I continued, mixing fraudulently obtained money with legitimate investments is called commingling of assets. That makes your entire account subject to review. Ethan's voice broke through, angry and desperate. You didn't have to go this far, Mom. I stood. Neither did you, son. He rose too, his composure cracking. You're ruining everything. Do you even realize what this means for me? For us? I nodded slowly. Yes, it means you finally get to feel what I felt when you betrayed me. He stared at me like I'd become someone else. Maybe I had. And before he could say another word, I opened the door and said softly, get out. After they left, I sat for a long time, trembling. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. My hand shook as I made tea, trying to calm my heartbeat. When David died, I promised myself I'd always protect Ethan. I never thought I'd have to protect myself from him. But now, I was protecting David's memory. The next few weeks unfolded like a movie. The court issued an injunction against Ethan's access to the sale funds. His credit cards were frozen temporarily, pending investigation. His shiny image, the young, ambitious entrepreneur, began to crumble. The journalist I'd spoken to earlier, Miss Klein, ran a story titled, When Family Betrays Trust, A Mother's Fight to Reclaim Her Home. The article went viral locally. While my name was withheld, the story struck a nerve, especially among older readers who'd faced financial exploitation by family. Support poured in online, strangers sending messages of solidarity, empathy, and heartbreak. And Ethan? He was furious. He sent me a string of messages, first pleading, then threatening, then silent. It was that silence that told me he was planning something. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Bennett? This is Detective Alvarez with the Cape May Police Department. Are you available to talk? My stomach dropped. Yes, of course. When he arrived, he was polite but serious. We received a report regarding alleged elder coercion and document falsification. It seems your son's wife filed a complaint suggesting you're confused and possibly being manipulated by your lawyer. I laughed bitterly. She's claiming I'm senile? The detective didn't smile. We're required to look into it. I just wanted to hear your side before this gets messy. I handed him copies of the will, the property deeds, the communications from my attorney, and my medical records, all showing perfect cognitive health. He looked them over, nodded slowly, and sighed. Mrs. Bennett, between you and me, I think they're desperate. We'll close this quickly, but brace yourself. People like them don't quit quietly. I thanked him, but my hands shook long after he left. Not because I was scared, but because I realized something deeper. Ethan and Claire weren't just trying to save money anymore. They were trying to destroy me. That night, I took out David's old photo again, the one of him standing by the shore, sunlight in his hair, smiling at me through the camera lens. I whispered to it, they think I'll fold. They don't know who I am. Then an idea came to me, a way to end this once and for all. If they wanted to fight publicly, I'd fight smartly. I contacted Miss Klein again. You can use my name now, I told her. She hesitated. Are you sure, Margaret? It'll go national. That's the point. Within a week, the full story broke across several news outlets. Widow fights back. Mother sues son after he secretly sold her home. It exploded. People were outraged, especially after Miss Klein included court documents showing how Ethan transferred the deed without my full consent. Claire's boutique design business, the one she flaunted on social media, began bleeding clients overnight. Her comment section turned into a battlefield of public shaming. I didn't feel joy at their suffering. Not at first, but I did feel justice. And that, in its own quiet way, was satisfaction enough. Ethan finally called again, this time in tears. Mom, please, he said, voice shaking. You've made your point. You've humiliated me. Everyone knows. I lost everything. Can we just stop this? I stayed silent for a long moment. Then I said softly, you didn't just sell a house, Ethan. You sold trust. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back. But we're family, he cried. I took a deep breath. Family protects. Family loves. You didn't either. He tried to argue, to explain, but the words tangled in his throat. I could hear the guilt finally eating at him. I'm sorry, he whispered finally. Please. I didn't think. That's your problem, I interrupted. You never thought beyond yourself. Weeks passed. The case dragged on, and each day the tide turned further in my favor. My attorney uncovered emails between Ethan and Claire discussing the sale. One line in particular sealed the coffin. Once Mom's out of the way, we can use the funds for the firm. She'll never know. That line, time-stamped, was enough for the judge to fast-track the ruling. Within a month, the court invalidated the sale, returning ownership of the property to me. The buyers were refunded from Ethan's frozen account, and I was awarded restitution for emotional distress and legal costs. When I received the verdict, I didn't celebrate. I just went to the beach house, my house, and sat on the porch watching the sun dip into the water. For the first time in months, I felt calm. The ocean was back to whispering instead of roaring. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes red and tired. He didn't speak right away. Neither did I. The waves filled the silence. Finally, he said, "You won." I looked up at him. This was never about winning. He hesitated. I know. I lost myself, Mom. I thought if I could control things, I'd finally feel successful. But all I did was hurt the one person who ever believed in me. I didn't respond. Not yet. He knelt beside me, the way he used to as a child when he'd scrape his knee. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. For a moment, I saw the little boy again. The one who used to bring me shells and say they were treasure. My throat tightened. Sorry doesn't fix everything, I whispered. But it's a start. He nodded slowly. Can I help fix the house up? Maybe earn back your trust. I looked out at the horizon, thinking. Maybe someday, I said quietly. But for now, I just need peace. He nodded again, stood up, and walked away. And this time, I didn't stop him. Because some forgiveness takes time, and some lessons require solitude. That night, I slept in my old bed with the windows open, the sound of waves echoing through the house. The scent of salt, the creak of the wooden floors, the whisper of memories, all still there, untouched. David's words came back to me like a promise. When I'm gone, this house will still hold us together. Maybe he was right. Maybe in its own painful way it had. After the trial, life didn't return to normal, not really. It just became quieter. The phone stopped ringing, the headlines faded, and the world went back to its rhythm, pretending it hadn't watched a mother and son destroy each other in court. But inside me, something still burned, not anger exactly, but a mixture of grief and hollow space. A kind of silence that fills your chest and makes you wonder if forgiveness is even possible after betrayal runs that deep. I stayed at the beach house for weeks, doing small repairs, painting, scrubbing, sanding. Every corner reminded me of David, his laughter in the kitchen, his favorite chair by the window, his footprints in the sand. I found peace in repetition, until the letter arrived. It came in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a short, printed note: "You think you've won. But the truth about your son and his wife is darker than you know. Someone who still cares." I read it 3 times, my heart pounding harder each time. At first, I assumed it was just another cruel stranger from the internet. But something about the phrasing, "someone who still cares," made me stop. I didn't tell anyone, not even my lawyer. Instead, I took a drive into town, my mind spinning. What truth could be darker than what had already happened? Ethan selling my home behind my back, Claire filing false claims against me, them both publicly shaming me. What else was left? That night, unable to sleep, I did what any mother would do. I started digging. Ethan had cut off most contact after our last conversation. The only thing I knew was that he and Claire were taking time apart, according to a short message he'd sent. But I wasn't satisfied. I opened my laptop and began searching his company website, his LinkedIn, local records. Within an hour, I found something strange. His firm's website was offline. Then, through a public filing database, I discovered the company had been dissolved, quietly, just 2 months before the court hearing. Why would he dissolve his business right before the legal case? Then another detail struck me. The same address used for the company registration was listed under Claire's name in a new LLC filed a month later. The new company was called Blue Harbor Interiors, Claire's new design firm. But the registered owner wasn't just Claire. It was Claire Bennett and Samuel Hayes. I froze. Samuel Hayes had been Ethan's business partner for years, and also, rumor had it, one of Claire's friends from her boutique days. My gut twisted. I clicked through every link I could find: business licenses, photos, old posts. Then I found it, an Instagram photo of Claire and Samuel at a gala. She was wearing the same gold bracelet Ethan had given her on their anniversary, except the caption read, "New beginnings with my favorite partner, Dizzy no tags." No mention of Ethan. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. My son's wife, the woman who helped him take everything from me, had turned around and stolen everything from him. There was a bitter kind of poetry in that. But it wasn't just betrayal. It was destruction. Claire had taken over his business, his reputation, and his money, the same way they tried to take mine. And in that moment, the rage I'd been suppressing for months finally surfaced. Not because I wanted revenge anymore, but because I realized Ethan hadn't just wronged me, he'd been a pawn in a much larger game. And the person pulling the strings was about to lose everything. The next day, I called my attorney, Mr. Lowe. "I need your help again," I said. He sighed. "Margaret, please tell me you're not reopening the case. You already won." "No," I said softly. "This isn't about me this time. It's about Ethan." There was a long pause. "What's happened?" "I think he's being set up. And I think his wife has already moved on to his partner. I need to find out how deep it goes." "Margaret," his tone softened. "You've already been through enough." "I know," I replied, "but I'm still a mother." Over the next week, I worked quietly with Mr. Lowe to gather evidence. Financial records, transfers, emails, it all pointed to one thing. Claire and Samuel had been siphoning money out of Ethan's company months before the sale of my house. In fact, the entire reason Ethan had been desperate to sell the house was because they were trying to cover up missing funds. My son hadn't sold the property out of greed. He'd sold it to patch a hole they'd created. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined. not just of me, but of him. And when I found the final piece, an email from Samuel's account labeled Final Transfer Confirmation, sent just 2 days after the sale, I knew what I had to do. I printed everything, put it in a folder, and drove into the city. Ethan was renting a small apartment downtown, far from the beach, far from everything that reminded him of the life he'd lost. When he opened the door, he looked exhausted. His once confident posture was gone. His hair was unkempt, his eyes hollow. "Mom," he said quietly, "what are you doing here?" "I came to show you something," I said, holding up the folder. He hesitated before letting me in. The apartment was sparse, just a couch, a few boxes, and empty bottles on the counter. I sat down and placed the folder on the table. "You need to read this." He frowned, flipping through the pages. I watched his face shift, confusion, disbelief, then horror. "What is this?" he whispered. "Where did you get it?" "Your business partner and your wife," I said softly. "They've been working together. They used your name, your company, and when it was convenient, they used your mother's house." He dropped the papers. No, that can't be." "Claire wouldn't," "She would," I said firmly. "And she did." He sank back, his hands trembling. God, I was so stupid. I thought I was in control. "No," I said. "You were in love. That's not stupidity, that's humanity." Tears welled in his eyes. "She said we built something together. That we just needed a little more money to stabilize the business. She said she loved me." I reached across the table and took his hand, for the first time since everything began. "You loved her, and she took advantage of that, just like you took advantage of me." He looked at me, ashamed. "I deserve this, don't I?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "You deserve to learn, but she deserves to pay." Over the next few days, I helped Ethan file charges against Claire and Samuel: embezzlement, wire fraud, identity misuse. When the detectives reviewed the documents, they said it was one of the cleanest trails they'd seen. Almost like they'd wanted to get caught. Maybe they'd gotten careless. Or maybe, deep down, they didn't think anyone would believe me. The old woman they both underestimated. But the system has a way of catching up eventually. Within a month, both Claire and Samuel were arrested. The news made headlines again. Couple behind small business fraud linked to prior family dispute arrested for embezzlement. The irony was almost too much to bear. Ethan didn't celebrate. He just stared at the screen and whispered, "She ruined everything." I touched his shoulder. "No, son, you let her ruin everything. But now you get to rebuild." He looked at me, eyes red. "Can you ever forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I said, "Start by forgiving yourself." Weeks turned into months. Ethan slowly began piecing his life back together. Therapy, new job, a quieter routine. He called me every few days now, not to ask for anything, but just to talk. About books, about the weather, about how he was trying to cook again. One afternoon, he came by the beach house with a small box. "I found this in storage," he said. "It's Dad's old compass. He always said it would help him find his way home." He handed it to me, smiling sadly. Maybe now it's time I start finding mine. I held the compass in my palm, its brass warm from his hand. "Just remember, Ethan, home isn't where you live. It's who you love." He nodded. "I'm starting to understand that." Later that evening, I sat on the porch, the compass still in my hand. The ocean breeze carried the faint scent of salt and memory. For years, I thought revenge was about winning, about proving I couldn't be taken for granted. But as I watched the waves roll in, I realized something softer, something truer. Revenge hadn't healed me. Forgiveness had. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant reclaiming peace without letting them rewrite my story. And maybe that was the real victory, not the court rulings or the money or the justice, but the silence that followed when the storm was finally over. The kind of silence that wasn't empty anymore. The morning after Sarah's meltdown, the house felt lighter. The salty air was back to its rhythm, curtains dancing softly, the distant sound of waves pushing and pulling at the shore. My hands, though trembling slightly, moved calmly through the motions of making breakfast. I set 2 cups on the table, one for me, one for Emma. Emma came down the stairs, wearing her soft blue hoodie and her hair tied in a loose braid. She looked like her father that morning, not the young, reckless man I'd fallen in love with, but the calm, wise one he grew into before he passed. She paused at the kitchen entrance, her eyes still wary. "Morning, honey," I said, sliding her a plate of toast. "Morning, Mom," she said quietly, glancing toward the beach through the big glass doors. "Is she gone?" "Yes," I said, sipping my coffee. "She left at sunrise." Emma sat down, exhaling. "Good." Then, after a pause, "You really planned all this, didn't you?" I looked at her, really looked, and smiled faintly. Every bit of it. For weeks, I had played the quiet fool, pretending to be the helpless, confused mother, the one Sarah underestimated. But I'd known about the sale of the house long before she confessed. I'd seen the papers. I'd read the emails. She thought she was so clever, using her maiden name and manipulating my son into thinking this was the best thing for everyone. But she didn't know that when she put the house on the market, she triggered a clause, one my late husband had quietly added before his death. He always said, "No one outside this family should ever profit from what we built." The clause stated that any attempt to sell the property without my written consent would immediately void ownership transfers and freeze the title under an automatic trust lock, which meant legally, Sarah had never owned it and never would. She thought she sold it. She thought she'd won. But all she'd done was expose herself. Emma stirred her coffee, watching me. "So what happens now?" "Now," I said. "Now I rebuild what's left and make sure your brother learns what loyalty really means." Later that afternoon, I met with a man named Daniel Blake, a real estate lawyer from the same firm my husband had used years ago. I hadn't seen him since the funeral, but he recognized me immediately. "Margaret," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I was wondering when I'd be hearing from you." "I take it you've seen the recent activity on the account," I replied. He smiled faintly. "You mean the fraudulent attempt to sell your property?" "Oh yes, the system flagged it automatically. Your husband was smart to build in those protections." We sat in his office overlooking the marina. The folder he opened was thick, filled with every document, email, and signature Sarah had forged. "She really thought she could get away with it," he said. I exhaled slowly. She thought I was weak, old, too sentimental to notice. He nodded. "I can have her reported for fraud and attempted theft. But since the title was never legally transferred, you're in the clear." "Let's not do that," I said, a small smirk forming on my lips. "Not yet. Let her believe she got away with it for a little while." Daniel raised a brow. "You have a plan?" "Oh, I always have a plan," I said. That night, I received a call from Michael. His voice was tired and guilty. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't know what to say. How about starting with 'I'm sorry'?" I replied, my voice steady but cold. He sighed. "I didn't know she'd do that. I thought selling the beach house would help us financially." "Sarah said you were struggling to keep up with taxes." "Sarah said a lot of things," I interrupted. "But did you ever stop to ask me if they were true?" Silence. "Then no, I didn't. Your father built that house with his hands," I said. "Every plank, every window, every brick, it's a part of him. You were a child when he died. But you used to sit on that porch and say you could still feel him there. Did you forget that?" Michael's voice cracked. "I didn't forget. I thought she had our best interests at heart." I laughed bitterly. "Her best interests, Michael. Not ours, not mine, and certainly not your father's memory." He was crying now. "Mom, please, what can I do to fix this?" "You'll know when the time comes," I said, then hung up. Weeks passed. Sarah and Michael returned from what they called a fresh start trip to Miami. I watched from a distance as they moved into their new apartment, the one Sarah insisted they could finally afford after selling the beach house. What she didn't know was that the buyer of the property was actually me. Through Daniel, I had created a shell company under my daughter Emma's name, one that legally repurchased the house when Sarah tried to sell it. She signed the documents, received the fake payment, and celebrated her triumph. But the funds were from a holding account, and once the sale was voided by the trust clause, the money was pulled back, leaving her with nothing. Her bank froze, her credit collapsed, and every victory she bragged about turned to dust. I didn't even need to confront her. The system did it for me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Michael showed up at my door. Alone. His eyes were hollow. Sarah left, he said flatly. I said nothing, just opened the door wider and gestured him in. She took what little savings we had left, he continued, voice trembling. She said I was holding her back, that she deserved better. I poured him some tea, sat beside him on the couch, and let the silence fill the room. Mom, he whispered, how did I let this happen? You wanted to believe in love, I said gently. That's not a crime. But loving the wrong person can destroy everything if you don't open your eyes. He nodded slowly, wiping his tears. I don't know where to go, he admitted. I smiled softly. You're already home. Months later, life began to heal in small ways. The house felt alive again. Laughter, coffee in the morning, Emma's sketches scattered across the table. Michael started therapy. He even began working on restoring the beach house, determined to repair what he nearly lost. One afternoon, as we painted the living room together, he said quietly, You always knew, didn't you? I did, I said, brushing a stroke across the wall. But sometimes people have to lose what matters before they understand its worth. He smiled sadly. You're stronger than I ever realized. I smiled back. You come from me. That strength was always in you. A year passed before I heard from Sarah again. A letter arrived, no return address, just my name, written in her neat handwriting. It read, Margaret, I know you probably hate me. Maybe you should. But I wanted you to know I lost everything. The money, the apartment, even Michael. You were right about me. I thought I could outsmart everyone. I was wrong. I heard you still live at the beach house. I hope you're happy there. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sarah, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the fireplace. The flames licked the edges and turned it to ash. As the last ember faded, I whispered to the fire, apology not accepted. Because forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned. And Sarah hadn't earned a thing. That night, as the waves crashed against the shore and the wind howled through the pines, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and thought about everything that had happened. Revenge hadn't been loud. It hadn't been cruel. It had been quiet, deliberate, the kind of justice that doesn't need applause. In the end, I hadn't needed to destroy her. She destroyed herself. All I did was make sure the truth came to light. And as the moon rose high, casting silver over the ocean, I realized something profound. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't watching someone fall, it's standing tall, stronger than they ever expected you to be. I leaned back in my chair, the sound of the sea whispering through the night, and smiled. Because the beach house, my house, was still mine. My peace was still mine. And my family, though broken and bruised, was healing. Sarah had tried to take everything. But she forgot one simple truth. You can sell a house, but you can't sell home.
Like, subscribe, and comment below this video for the next story.